Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Métis. But I'm here representing teachers and public education that serve students in all areas of our province in Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 territories. I'll make a brief statement and then I will open it up for questions afterwards. So it was just last week, we held another news conference to share our reaction to the additional $40 million that government announced for our 27 school divisions. And we said we were extremely disappointed because $40 million doesn't even come close to beginning to address the significant problems that government has created by cutting funding over the last decade. It is clear they are not understanding those very real challenges that students and teachers are experiencing in their schools in all areas of our province. So maybe I can make a comparison that more people can relate to, or maybe government can understand a little bit better. Most of us have vehicles. Many of us use them to drive to work. I live in rural Saskatchewan. I have to drive to get really anywhere. So I'm driving down the road and my check engine light comes on. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to ask an expert. I'm going to find out what is wrong and I'm going to do something to fix that problem. Well, what if I ignore that advice? What's likely going to happen? Well, more lights are probably going to come on as more issues arise and compound, and it's going to get more expensive to fix. And eventually, if we do nothing about that problem, or if I do nothing about my vehicle, we're going to be forced to the side of the road, maybe with a flat tire. I might not have a spare to change. Maybe the entire dashboard is flashing lights at me and there's smoke coming out from underneath of the hood. I don't want to be in that situation. And unfortunately, if we continue on the path that we're going, if government does not change their course, that is likely the situation that we're going to see in public education in Saskatchewan. As we've looked at the numbers a little bit more closely, what has emerged from this $40 million announcement is a very clear scenario where it seems that government is picking favorites amongst our province. But I want to be very clear that there is no one winning in this situation, and least of all, our kids. Kids are impacted by these choices of government across our entire province. So even the school divisions that received a larger portion of last week's $40 million are still going to be significantly underfunded and are likely to continue to see cuts moving from the current school year into our next school year. So we have a little map to show some examples of what we're talking about, some of the numbers that we have seen. So just to explain this a little bit, this is looking at the government stated shortfall after the budget announcement, and then we added to that the June 1st funding announcement. So as I said, it is clear the government is continuing to view the problems in education as a largely urban issue that is caused by increasing enrollment from the surge of newcomers coming into Saskatchewan. And I continue to say growth in Saskatchewan is great. It is great to see people coming to this province, but we want them to stay here and we need a well-funded education for that to happen. And as well, I want to be clear, the numbers here are not good. All school divisions are still facing significant shortfalls and will likely continue to struggle to maintain staffing and programming levels from this current year compared to next year. I will continue to be disappointed, not only in this government, but from other leaders in education who say things are going to be okay, because the status quo means that students' needs are not being met and students' needs continue to be triaged. Students are left on wait lists for years to get the supports that they need. And in most areas of our province, education in the status quo will continue to be in crisis or on the verge of crisis. So these are just a few examples, but again, important to note, there are no divisions in our province talking about improving services next year. So the $40 million is also significantly less than what the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Corporation is projected to receive. So in this, as you can see, this funding doesn't add up. $40 million additional money for 27 different school divisions to address all of the issues of enrollment and class complexity, as we've said, is just not enough. And yet, the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Corporation, after the announcement that was made this week, is now expected to see over $57 million in funding for the upcoming school year. To make a comparison, if we looked at some school divisions across our province that receive about that same amount of funding, we would be looking at Northeast School Division and Northwest School Division, to give two examples. One's a little above and one's a little below. Well, both of those school divisions are close to 4,500 full-time equivalent students. When we divide those budgets out, that means that those students are funded at about $13,000 per student. Well, looking at the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Corporation, they've estimated that they expect to have about 2,000 full-time equivalent students. And yet their funding is the same as a division with nearly double the students and some significant transportation costs in those areas of the province. They have a large geographical area. They have to move students to get into the schools. To be fair, $23 million was included in the budget for startup and operating costs. We don't know exactly how much of that is startup costs, and an additional $1 million was announced later, again for startup and operating costs. So if we remove that, the remainder of the $57 million comes from estimated tuition fees that school divisions are required to pay, plus an $18 million added investment that was announced earlier this week. This means that each full-time equivalent student in the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Corporation, if we just look at that $33 million that is left, removing the $24 million that was announced for startup and operating costs, that means that they're going to receive in about $18,000 in per student funding at the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Corporation. And we know it's just slightly higher than that because some of the $24 million is also for operating costs. This is $5,000 more than students are receiving in other school divisions of a comparable size. This is a very clear choice that our government is making. Saskatchewan has a $1 billion surplus. Government managed to find $57 million to add another layer of complexity to our struggling education system, rather than simply fix the issues that we are currently seeing in our classrooms. We have been asking for this government to provide predictable, sustainable funding. This is a message that is echoed by Saskatchewan School Boards Association as well. We need to be able to meet the growing needs of our students and the growing population. And the funding that is being provided through the budget and through the additional $40 million does neither of those things. The timing of this announcement also raises questions about our government's motives. Funding enrollment increases and addressing inflationary pressures is a minimum expectation that should be addressed through budget. And rather than including those announcements in budget simply 2 months ago, or approximately 2 months ago, government chose to play politics and create the impression that they were being responsive and solving a problem that was being created in our education system. This is not news. This is not something that was unexpected. We have been talking about underfunding in education for years and years, and we have been talking about the real challenges that continue to increase in our schools over the year. So the $40 million announcement followed a rally with approximately 3,500 students or people who gathered at the legislature. This included parents, teachers, other public members who are just concerned about public education, and of course, students who want to be able to be successful in their classes. We told government that enough is enough. Public education is important, and we need them to start making it a priority. So it's clear that political pressures work, rallies work, and we need to keep this momentum going to hold our government accountable to their responsibilities to support our students. So please, I hope everyone signs up for Tell Them Tuesday, attend future rallies for public education, or attend local events to speak to your MLA directly about the importance of having a well-funded, high-quality public education system that is accessible to all students across our province. Again, there is $1 billion surplus. We have the money to fund education. Our government is simply choosing not to. So the graphics that were provided in the event today will be sent to everyone following in the news release following our conclusion. So I'd be pleased to take any questions. If you just raise your hand, I can call on you.
Perfect. Just really quickly, I'm assuming then there was some talk of favoritism for school divisions. Is that mainly between the 27 school divisions and the distance learning?
Yeah, it's clear that our government is making the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Centre a priority, and it's great to see that those students are going to be supported, but we need all students across our 27 school divisions supported as well. We want to ensure that they have the right supports, the professional support, and those additional programs that help them succeed in their pre-K to 12 education. So I'm not sure why the government has created such a priority on the Saskatchewan Distance Learning Centre compared to all across our province. It's also clear that our government is only seeing this as a largely urban issue, and we are having significant issues all across our province in education, not just in the urban center. And that's not to minimize the issues that are occurring in urban centers. There are very real issues with growing enrollments in our large centers. But there are just as significant issues that are happening in rural areas that are not being addressed by this government either.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up and then one more from Regina? So with, I think bargaining is coming up. So with that coming, what do teachers want, or what does the Federation want?
Well, our teachers want students to be supported, and the majority of our proposals in bargaining is looking at how we can get additional supports for students and how we can ensure that those supports continue from year to year. We see this government provide these one-time funds, like the $40 million one-time fund. We don't know if those supports are going to be there in a future year, and we need to ensure that our students are supported this year, next year, and for years to come.
And then, sorry, last question. I think maybe more in Regina it's occurring, but there's some older schools, obviously, and with that in the summertime temperatures, some schools have no AC. Is that another issue, or is it maybe more isolated?
No, that is an issue that I see all across the province as well. Some of our schools, as you said, they're aging buildings, and they need to have that maintenance that is required to upkeep them. That can't be at a cost of our operating funds, though, as well. So I know government does talk about those things as a whole lot, and when they talk about increases to education, they also often include the capital funds. We focus a lot on the operating funds because we want to ensure that students are well supported with the professional supports that ensure their success. But also lowering the number of students in a class can also impact the heat in a classroom too. If you have 33, 36, or 40 kids crammed into a classroom, that temperature rises pretty quickly in comparison to if you had a reasonable number of students in the classroom. But yes, we want to have safe learning environments that are set up for student success. I'm going to go to Brody.
Hey, thanks for taking the question. So when you look at Sask DLC, I know it's still early and we haven't seen it kind of running up yet, but when you look at kind of the $57 million going into this, would you do you think that the Sask DLC kind of model is needed, or would that money be better spent going to public schools?
Well, we know, and I know from my experience, I had students that thrived in that online learning environment, but those supports were already being provided by our 27 school divisions, or for the most part by our 27 school divisions. So we, the Federation, didn't understand the need to centralize that support because it does really seem like we're adding another layer of complexity to our systems that are struggling so significantly right now. I hope it is a success. I hope that it is able to alleviate some of the pressures that we see in our schools. But at this time, to me, it just seems to continue to erode those supports that are being able to be provided by our 27 school divisions across the province. So we continue to have some significant concerns about it. We're going to continue to watch and question and try and support as best we can. But we need to make sure that we're supporting all people across this province in their schooling.
Perfect. That's all I got.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you. I was just wondering for a little bit more clarification on the favoritism. Is it just the favoritism towards the DLC over the 27 school divisions, or is there favoritism between the 27 school divisions as well?
Well, we saw more funding come into our urban centers. And so it's either favoritism of the urban centers, or it's a lack of acknowledging the real issues that are occurring in our rural areas of the province. Many rural areas reported significant shortfalls, well over $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, and yet proportionally their increases, or the funding that was provided through the $40 million was not the same as what some of the larger urban centers received. And that is also removing the increases for enrollment. So 20 million of the 40 was for enrollment, and we did see more enrollment in large urban centers. So it does make sense that urban centers received more funds there. But the other 20 million was for class complexity. And we see very large classes in our urban centers. We see very extreme needs of students in our urban centers, but we see those same challenges in our rural centers. Many rural centers have early elementary classes as high as 30 or higher. We see split classes in many places, so 2 or 3 or 4 curriculum being taught by one teacher to one group of students. I even talked to a teacher earlier in the year who told me that they were teaching, I believe it was 7 different math curriculums at one time to 18 different students. And that really is just setting them up for failure. It's not the best situation for students to ensure their success either. So we need our government to ensure that those funds that they're providing really address all of the real issues that we see across our province. But
and then
no one's winning in this situation either. So I'm not trying to say that urban centers got what they wanted. No one is getting enough to maintain service levels. It's just some proportionally received more than others.
And for a follow-up, I guess, have these concerns of favoritism been taken to the Ministry of Education? And if so, have you heard back? Has there been any kind of response?
No, I haven't had a conversation with the minister since since the announcement came out on June 1st, but I am always open to a conversation. We have committed to working together. I have been bringing the concerns about challenges that schools are facing in urban and rural centers since the government's announcement after our rally, where they said we have been heard, and the minister said that he was planning to speak with the directors of the large urban school divisions. And I made it very clear that these issues are not just large urban school division issues, and he should be meeting with all school divisions to ensure that they have the supports that they need and the funds that they need to support their students.
Samantha, it's Adam here. I'm using Corel's account, so that was the issue earlier.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I was just wondering, the money that the government had tied to the larger school divisions, and you've spoken about this, but it had to do with larger enrollment in those centers. So is that money, should that money have been spread more evenly? Is it based on a formula? I'm talking about the stuff that was just released last week.
So the $20 million portion out of the 40, it was based on enrollment growth of what we saw in this current school year. And so, like I said, I expected to see more if it was just based on enrollment growth, more in those large urban centers. But we continue to talk about, or I continue to talk about with the minister, that this is not an issue that is driven by enrollment. This is an issue that is driven by chronic underfunding in education that has impacted every single school division. Enrollment, yes, it impacts our schools, it impacts the size of our classrooms, it impacts the access to support for our students. As enrollment increases, we also need to see those supports increase. But the real underlying issue that we see across the province is chronic underfunding, where the government has not kept, their budgets have not kept pace with inflation and enrollment, and cuts have continued to happen year after year after year, to the point where we've gone from first in our country to now 8th in our country. And we want to make sure that everyone, urban centers and rural centers, and northern centers have all of the supports that they need to ensure every student is getting timely access to the professionals to ensure their success in their schools.
And I wanted to ask, so it was asked earlier, but there seem to be some concerns, and I know you talked about it with heat in schools at the moment. Also, school buses are an issue, and we have, reports of bus drivers having 35 plus degrees in their buses. What can this government do? What can the divisions do? What should they do about this? Because I don't anticipate there'll be money in the next couple of weeks, but the students are still going to be in classrooms for a couple of weeks. So what should be done in the meantime to help teachers and students deal with this heat?
In the meantime, I don't know. It's a hard situation to be in. I guess we hope for cooler weather. Open windows on buses, open windows in classrooms. I don't have solutions for some of those things, because there are classes in schools where the windows don't open, or maybe there aren't windows and there's not enough airflow in the schools. This is not a quick solution. I don't think that there's, other than providing fans in a classroom or portable AC. But all of those things, they have a financial cost to all of those as well. We know that through this chronic underfunding of education, divisions have had to pull from their reserves in order to cover the budgetary shortfalls that they've had, where I think typically have been able to use those reserves for some of the big capital projects, like maybe installing air conditioning systems, or ensuring that their buses are well maintained and have proper ventilation in both of those situations. But so many of our school divisions have depleted their reserves to the point where they're working budget to budget, and unless it comes through operating funds, they're just stuck waiting. And many of those capital projects, they take years to plan, they take years to execute, and put supports in place and ensure that they have properly supported buildings, transportation units, and that environments are safe for kids.
So Samantha, Jaron actually emailed me a question. So,
okay.
Since we seem to be having some mic problems there. So it's mentioned that the government is picking favorites, mainly urban centers. However, both of Prince Albert's divisions are looking at shortfalls. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, I don't think Prince Albert is seeing the same type of enrollment growth that those really large urban centers are seeing. So I don't know why PA isn't receiving additional supports. As was mentioned in the question, they've reported shortfalls. I know that the Sask Rivers director has been very public about talking about the challenges, and the board trustees have been talking about the challenges in those areas, and that just echoes what we see across our province. Some boards are more vocal than others, but we know that there are challenges, and we need to see more of the leaders in education talking about the realities that they're facing through budgetary constraints or through the realities of classrooms in schools. So I don't know why Saskatoon and Regina seem to have taken a little bit more, but it just does come down to the fact that I think government is looking at this as a very narrow, or with a very narrow lens on enrollment growth only, and not looking at it as a whole picture of chronic underfunding of education from the last decade, or increasing class complexity, we've reported we've seen an increase of about 40% of our students have or require intensive supports in their education. And we're not seeing government really talk about those challenges. And when they do talk about class complexity, it's very watered down. It's not the real reality, and it's not acknowledging the real challenges that teachers and students are facing in their classrooms. Thanks for the question. Thanks for emailing it in. I'm so sorry that we're having problems with the mic.
Can you hear me at all, Samantha?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah.
There we go. I appreciate the question there, and sorry for my audio issues. And yes, you had my name pronounced correct the first time, so thank you. Just a quick follow-up. Just in regards to the 40 million, out of all the 27 school divisions, 6 of the divisions didn't receive funding in both of the allotments, and 5 of the 6 you could consider being in northern Saskatchewan, 2 in Prince Albert, the Northwest, La Crosse, Light of Christ. I don't know if you have any idea why these divisions were not included in both, when the other 21 were.
I really don't know. I don't want to make guesses on the motives of the government, why they're making the choices that they're making. It really does seem like they are ignoring the challenges that we're facing in our schools and in our classrooms, and ignoring their responsibility of providing that well-funded, high-quality education to everyone across our province. So that I would encourage you to ask the minister. I will also try and reach out and ask the minister to get some questions around, or some answers around why some and not others. But I do think that they are looking at it as that narrow lens with enrollment only. But everywhere across the province is looking at increased class sizes, fewer teachers in their schools, fewer professional supports, less access to speech language pathologists and mental health counselors that are so very needed in our schools to support our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Perrin?
Yeah, I have one. Yeah. We talk a lot about school division, the English one, but do you think that funding are sufficient for French one? And when I say French one, I'm talking about the Conseil des écoles françaises.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something that I recognized myself when I talk about education and the lack of supports. I often talk about lack of supports with like English as an additional language support. But definitely we have a severe lack of those professional supports with French as an additional language. And those schools are experiencing the same challenges that we are experiencing in our public systems, or public school divisions and Catholic school divisions. And they would be included within the 27 that I'm talking about that are being left behind and potentially ignored. I know the Conseil has some additional challenges trying to recruit people and retain people that have that French language too. So complexity on top of complexity in all of our unique situations that we're looking at across Saskatchewan.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see any more hands, but I would always welcome questions. And again, just want to thank everyone for being here and being part of the conversation. And like I said, I hope to continue the conversation. So if you have additional questions that come out, if you want clarification of anything, please let me know. And then we'll also be sending out the graphics that we had used along with the news release and a recording of the video after or shortly after we finished. So thank you.